July 10th, 1943. Dawn breaks over the southern coast of Sicily, and Private Antonio Russo, 19th Infantry Division, watches from his concrete pillbox as the sea itself seems to catch fire. Hundreds of landing craft, thousands of them, stretching to the horizon in every direction. The naval bombardment has been going for 20 minutes now, and the ground beneath his feet shakes with each salvo. His hands tremble as he loads his rifle. Beside him, Sergeant Mancini crosses himself and mutters a prayer. The largest amphibious invasion in history to that point was hitting Sicily's beaches. 160,000 Allied troops, American, British, Canadian, supported by 3,000 ships and 4,000 aircraft. Against them, 230,000 Axis defenders, mostly Italian, with 6 German divisions stiffening the defense. On paper, the numbers looked almost even. In reality, the battle was already over. The landing craft hit the beaches at Gela, Licata, Scogliti, and a dozen other points along the southern coast. Antonio fires 3 shots at the approaching Americans before his rifle jams. He looks at Sergeant Mancini, who has already thrown down his weapon and raised his hands. Around them, the entire defensive position is collapsing. Men are running inland, throwing away helmets, unbuckling equipment as they flee. Some are already waving white undershirts. By noon, American troops are 3 miles inland. By sunset, the beachheads are secure. The Italian coastal divisions have simply evaporated. Whole battalions surrender without firing a shot. At one beach, 200 Italian soldiers wait in formation to be taken prisoner, their weapons stacked neatly beside them. Our American captain later writes home, "They seemed relieved it was over." 300 miles north in Rome, Benito Mussolini sits in his office at Palazzo Venezia, reading the first reports. He is 60 years old, his face puffy, his famous jaw now sagging with age and stress. The reports are catastrophic. His commanders are using words like collapse and rout. One telegram reads simply, "Situation desperate. Troops will not fight." He picks up the telephone and calls General Alfredo Guzzoni, commander of Italian 6th Army in Sicily. The conversation lasts 4 minutes. When Mussolini hangs up, his hands are shaking. He turns to his secretary and says, "The Italian soldier has lost his fighting spirit." It is perhaps the most honest thing he has said in years. For 2 decades, Mussolini has built his regime on the myth of Italian martial prowess. The new Roman Empire, the warrior nation, the heir to Caesar's legions. He has sent his armies to Ethiopia, Albania, Greece, North Africa, Russia. He has promised victory after victory. And now, on Italian soil, his soldiers are surrendering in their thousands without a fight. The next morning, July 11th, German forces launch a counterattack at Gela. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division, supported by Italian Livorno Division, drives toward the beaches. For a few hours, the outcome hangs in the balance. American troops, still consolidating their positions, face 60 German tanks rolling toward them. Naval gunfire saves them. The cruiser USS Boise fires salvo after salvo, each shell weighing over 200 pounds. The German attack breaks apart. The Livorno Division, seeing the panzers retreat, simply dissolves. Men walk away from their positions and head for home. Mussolini receives the news in the afternoon. He is meeting with his son-in-law, Count Galeazzo Ciano, who serves as foreign minister. Ciano later records the conversation in his diary. Mussolini says, "The troops did not fight. The coastal divisions were supposed to hold for 48 hours. They lasted 4. Perhaps, Ciano suggests carefully, the men are tired of the war." Mussolini's face darkens. "They are tired. I'm tired. The German allies are tired. But we fight on because we must." But even as he says it, he knows the truth. His people are not tired. They are finished. They have endured 3 years of defeats, shortages, bombing raids, and broken promises. They have watched their sons die in African deserts and Russian snows for a war they never wanted. And now the Allies are on Italian soil, and the game is up. By July 15th, the Allies control the entire southern coast of Sicily. They are pushing inland against stiffening German resistance, but the Italian units are simply melting away. Entire regiments disappear into the countryside. Officers abandon their commands. The Sicilian civilian population, far from resisting the invaders, is greeting them with wine and flowers. In some towns, people line the streets cheering as American tanks roll past. Mussolini receives a telegram from Hitler demanding a meeting. The Führer wants to discuss the situation in Sicily and the defense of Italy. The message is phrased politely, but the subtext is clear. Hitler wants to know if Italy is about to collapse entirely. The meeting is set for July 19th at Feltre, a town in northern Italy near the Austrian border. Mussolini travels north by train, his mind churning with arguments he plans to make. He will tell Hitler that Italy needs more German troops, more aircraft, more tanks. He will explain that the Italian people are exhausted, but still loyal. He will ask for understanding, for support, for time. He arrives at the villa where the meeting will take place to find Hitler already there, pacing like a caged animal. The Führer has brought a massive entourage, generals, adjutants, secretaries. Mussolini has brought only a handful of staff. Already the power dynamic is clear. They sit down in a conference room at 10 in the morning. Hitler immediately launches into a monologue. He speaks for 3 hours without pause. He rants about Italian military incompetence, about the need for fanatical resistance, about the certainty of final victory. He pounds the table, he waves his arms, he shouts. Mussolini sits across from him, silent, shrinking into his chair. General Vittorio Ambrosio, Italian Chief of Staff, is present. He later describes Mussolini's behavior as pathetic. The Duce, once famous for his bombastic speeches and aggressive posturing, says almost nothing. When Hitler finally pauses and asks for his response, Mussolini mumbles something about Italian determination and the need for more resources. His voice is barely audible. Hitler launches into another hour-long tirade. Mussolini sits there, taking it, saying nothing of substance. The meeting breaks for lunch. Over the meal, word arrives that Allied bombers are hitting Rome. The first major air raid on the Italian capital. 500 aircraft dropping thousands of tons of bombs on the city's rail yards and industrial districts. The symbolism is devastating. As Hitler lectures Mussolini about fighting to the last man, Rome itself is burning. The meeting resumes after lunch. Hitler talks for another 2 hours. By the time it ends, Mussolini has agreed to nothing and committed to nothing. He boards his train back to Rome that evening, defeated and humiliated. One of his aides later recalls, "He looked like a man who had just attended his own funeral." Back in Rome, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. The bombing raid has killed over 1,500 civilians. The city's population is terrified and angry. Food supplies are running low. The black market is the only functioning economy. And in Sicily, the Italian military is in full retreat. By July 20th, the Allies control half the island. German forces are fighting skillfully, conducting a fighting withdrawal to the northeast, but they are alone. The Italian units have ceased to exist as coherent formations. Mussolini calls a meeting of his military commanders. He asks them directly, "Can we hold Sicily?" General Ambrosio answers, "No, Duce, Sicily is lost." How long can the Germans delay the inevitable? Perhaps 3 weeks, perhaps a month, but the outcome is certain. Mussolini leans back in his chair. He is silent for a long moment. Then he says, "And the mainland, can we defend Italy?" The generals exchange glances. Finally, Ambrosio says, "Not without massive German reinforcements. And even then," he trails off. Even then, Mussolini finishes the thought. We would be fighting on Italian soil, destroying our own cities, killing our own people. Yes, Duce. Mussolini dismisses them. He sits alone in his office, staring at the map of Sicily on his wall. The Allied advance is marked in red arrows, driving north and east. The Italian defensive positions are marked in blue. Most of the blue markers have already been crossed out. He has lost. Not just Sicily, not just the war. He has lost everything. His empire, his prestige, his power. The myth of the new Rome has shattered against the reality of American industrial might and British determination. His soldiers will not fight because they have no reason to fight. They have seen through the propaganda and the posturing. They know he has led them into disaster. But Mussolini is not the only one who knows this. In the halls of power, in the military high command, in the fascist Grand Council itself, men are beginning to whisper, the Duce has failed. Italy is facing catastrophe. Something must be done. On July 24th, the fascist Grand Council meets in Rome. It is a body that has not met in years. Mussolini has ruled by decree, ignoring the institutional structures of his own regime. But now, with crisis looming, the council has demanded a meeting. 28 members gather in the Palazzo Venezia. Mussolini presides, but he is no longer in control. Dino Grandi, a longtime fascist and former foreign minister, stands and reads a resolution. It calls for the king to assume his constitutional powers as commander of the armed forces. In effect, it strips Mussolini of military authority. It is a vote of no confidence, though it is not phrased that way. The debate lasts 10 hours, running past midnight into the early morning of July 25th. Mussolini defends himself, but his arguments are weak. He blames the Germans for insufficient support. He blames the Italian people for lack of will. He blames everyone but himself. His voice, once so powerful, sounds hollow. At 3 a.m, the vote is called. 19 members vote for Grandi's resolution. 7 vote against. 2 abstain. Mussolini has lost. He leaves the meeting in a daze. He goes home to his residence, the Villa Torlonia, and sleeps for a few hours. In the morning, he receives a message. King Victor Emmanuel III requests an audience at 5 o'clock that afternoon. Mussolini arrives at the Villa Savoia, the king's residence, at the appointed time. He is wearing his black fascist uniform. He expects a discussion about forming a new government, about restructuring the military command. He still believes he can salvage the situation. The king receives him in a small sitting room. Victor Emmanuel is a tiny man, barely 5 feet tall, dwarfed by Mussolini's bulk. But today, the king stands tall. The conversation lasts 20 minutes. The king is direct. The country has lost faith in you. The army will no longer follow you. I am relieving you of your duties. Marshal Pietro Badoglio will form a new government. Mussolini is stunned. But Majesty, the Grand Council vote was merely advisory. It was decisive, the king interrupts. Italy needs new leadership. Your services are no longer required. Mussolini tries to argue, but the king is immovable. Finally, Mussolini says, "What will become of me?" "You will be protected," the king assures him, "for your own safety." Mussolini leaves the villa at 5:30. As he walks toward his car, Carabinieri officers approach him. "Duce, please come with us. For your protection." He is being arrested. There, realization hits him like a physical blow. He gets into an ambulance. They are not even giving him the dignity of a staff car, and is driven away. Within hours, he will be imprisoned on the island of Ponza. His 21-year rule is over. In Sicily, the battle continues. German forces are conducting a masterful fighting retreat to the northeast corner of the island, preparing to evacuate across the Strait of Messina to the Italian mainland. Italian units have ceased to exist as military formations. Thousands of soldiers have simply gone home, walking away from the war. Others have surrendered to the Allies. A few continue to fight alongside the Germans, but they are the exception. On August 17th, the last German troops evacuate Sicily. The island is entirely in Allied hands. The campaign has lasted 38 days. The Allies have suffered approximately 20,000 casualties. The Axis has lost over 160,000 men, most of them Italian prisoners of war who surrendered without a fight. In his cell on Ponza, Mussolini learns of Sicily's fall from a radio broadcast. He is allowed no visitors, no communication with the outside world. He spends his days writing, trying to make sense of what has happened. In his notes, he returns again and again to the question of why his soldiers would not fight. He writes, "The Italian people have been corrupted by years of soft living. They have forgotten the warrior spirit of ancient Rome. They have become weak, decadent, unworthy of empire." It never occurs to him that perhaps his soldiers refused to fight because the war was unjust, that they surrendered because they saw no reason to die for a regime that had brought them nothing but suffering, that they welcomed the Allies because they represented liberation from fascism itself. In one of his notes, he writes bitterly, "I gave them an empire, and they repaid me with betrayal." But he did not give them an empire. He gave them defeats in Greece and North Africa. He gave them shortages and bombing raids. He gave them a pointless war fought for the glory of a dictator's ego. And when Allied troops stormed Sicily's beaches, his soldiers looked at those landing craft and saw something Mussolini could never understand. They saw their ticket home. On September 8th, Marshal Badoglio announces Italy's surrender to the Allies. The news is broadcast on radio at 7:30 in the evening. Across Italy, people pour into the streets celebrating. In Rome, crowds gather in the piazzas, singing and dancing. The war for them is over. German forces in Italy immediately disarm Italian units and take control of the country. Hitler orders Mussolini rescued from imprisonment. On September 12th, German commandos, led by Otto Skorzeny, raid the hotel in the Apennine Mountains where Mussolini is being held. They fly him to Germany, where Hitler installs him as the puppet ruler of the Italian Social Republic, a rump fascist state in northern Italy. But Mussolini is a broken man. He governs nothing. He commands no one. He is a ghost, haunting the ruins of his own failed ambitions. He spends the next 19 months as a German puppet, watching as Allied forces slowly grind their way up the Italian peninsula, destroying everything in their path. In April 1945, with the Allies closing in and the war clearly lost, Mussolini attempts to flee to Switzerland. He is captured by Italian partisans on April the 27th near Lake Como. The next day, he is executed by firing squad. His body, along with that of his mistress Clara Petacci and several other fascist officials, is taken to Milan and hung upside down from the roof of a gas station in Piazzale Loreto. Crowds gather to spit on the corpses and throw stones. It is a brutal, ignominious end for a man who once dreamed of resurrecting the Roman Empire. But perhaps it is fitting. Mussolini built his regime on violence and spectacle. He promised glory and delivered catastrophe. And when Allied troops stormed Sicily's beaches in the early hours of July 10th, 1943, the whole rotten edifice came crashing down in a matter of days. What did Mussolini say when it happened? He said his soldiers would not fight. He said they had lost their spirit. He blamed them for his own failures. He never understood that they were not weak or cowardly. They were simply done. Done with his lies, his wars, his grandiose delusions. When they saw those landing craft approaching through the dawn light, they made a choice. They chose life over death, peace over war, reality over propaganda. And Mussolini, sitting in his office in Rome, reading the reports of his collapsing armies, could only watch as everything he had built turned to dust. The Duce, who had promised to make Italy great again, had instead made it a battlefield. The man who claimed to embody the warrior spirit of Rome died hanging upside down in a gas station. reviled by the very people he had claimed to lead to glory. Sicily fell not because Italian soldiers were cowards, but because they were sane. They looked at the overwhelming Allied force, at the certainty of defeat, at the pointlessness of further sacrifice, and they made the rational choice. They surrendered. They went home. They saved their lives. And Mussolini, even in his final days, never forgave them for it.